The email firing him came in at 2:47 p.m. while we were cutting cake for his promotion. Name's Howard. I'm 61. The office still smells like burnt coffee and cheap ambition, and his old company pen rolled off my desk when I laughed. Ever been mocked by your own kid? And handed the punchline in paperwork. What would you have done if your son thought your life was a cautionary tale? Christmas morning used to arrive with Beau's feet pounding down the stairs, the scent of cinnamon rolls warming the hallway, and Lizette humming Bing Crosby while wrapping the final gifts. That year it arrived with cold hardwood floors, burnt coffee, and the sound of a cabinet door closing just a little too hard. I stood in the kitchen, fingers curled around the chipped mug Beau had painted in first grade. The blue stars were faded now, barely clinging to the ceramic glaze like memories smudged by time. I poured black coffee from the half-empty pot, letting the bitter aroma fill the air. Shale brushed past me, her eyes locked on her phone earbuds dangling like limp vines. "No one wants you here," she muttered, not even breaking stride. The words were surgical, not shouted, not spat, just delivered. Like a weather report. I didn't turn, I didn't ask her to repeat it. The air didn't need clarifying, it had already chilled. In the silence that followed, I looked toward the living room. The sketch above the mantel caught my eye, the old architectural rendering I'd drawn when we first broke ground on this house. It was slightly askew, one thumbtack missing. The image of our home, once hopeful in pencil and ink, now hung like a crooked relic from a life I'd stopped being part of. I crossed into the dining room. The table was set 3 places out of habit more than purpose. I laid out the bacon and eggs, arranging Beau's into a smiley face, just like he used to like. I even toasted the bread the way he preferred, slightly burnt edges with peanut butter spread, while it was still warm. No one came downstairs. I waited. I adjusted the placemats. I brushed invisible crumbs from the tablecloth. Eventually, Shale reappeared. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Lizette will pick Beau up at 11, she said. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Should I come too?" She blinked like I'd asked her if snow was wet. "Do you really think that's a good idea?" I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't have the strength for another round of being wrong in my own home. She turned, muttering something about drama under her breath as she disappeared upstairs. I wandered to the hallway and fixed my eyes on the banister. One nail had worked itself loose again, same spot Shale tripped over when she was 10, flinging hot chocolate across the wall. I remember patching that stain, painting over it with her favorite color, sea glass blue. I grabbed a hammer from the drawer and tapped the nail gently back in place. Each tap echoed longer than it should have. Upstairs, muffled voices. Beau asking if I was coming. Shale deflecting, a door closing. I drifted back to the living room. I sat on the couch, let my eyes blur past the blinking lights of the tree. No gifts bore my name. The ones I'd bought wrapped with trembling hands were neatly stacked under the armchair, ignored like a catalog left on the stoop. I slid a small envelope beneath the lowest branch of the tree, addressed to Beau in my best cursive. Inside was a letter simple from the heart. Memories of building forts out of couch cushions, his first bike ride, how he once said our backyard smelled like space. I didn't know if he'd read it. I just needed him to know I remembered. Minutes passed. Then Shale returned. "What's this?" she asked, holding the envelope. "It's just a letter. For Beau." She opened it without asking, skimmed a line or two. Her face hardened. "He doesn't need handwritten letters," she snapped. "He needs structure, consistency, not guilt." She crumpled the paper, tossed it into the trash, and left without looking back. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at the empty space beneath the tree. Somewhere upstairs, Beau was packing an overnight bag. I wondered if he'd remembered the mittens I'd knitted him last winter. Probably not. Probably never wore them. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Lizette. "I'm sorry, Beau cried this morning. He thought you'd be there." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, unsure what to say. I typed "I know," then deleted it. Typed "thank you," then erased that too. Eventually, I just locked the screen and turned the phone face down. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I drank it anyway. The bitterness felt honest. I looked once more at the sketch above the mantel. Still crooked, I didn't fix it. Let it hang. I spent most of the day bent over the filing cabinet in my study, pulling out old folders marked with dates and banks I barely remembered. A mild ache settled between my shoulder blades, but I kept going, maybe out of spite, maybe for clarity. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found what I didn't expect. The folder was navy blue from Beau's old credit union account, long since closed. I had opened it for him when he was born, a symbolic gesture. But behind it was something else, legal documents, thicker, weightier. The titles made my breath hitch. On the top page was a joint property declaration, Shale's name listed under mine, signed and dated in June 2020. I had no memory of this being discussed. Below it, another sheet, a property trust amendment, now with Shale as the primary trustee. My name had been neatly lined out, a digital signature substituted in its place. A scan, not even an original. My thumb slipped against the edge of a manila folder and sliced open a thin bead of red blossoming beneath the rust-colored paperclip. I took the papers and drove across town to Gregory Chase's office. He'd handled our estate filings since Louise passed. The front desk had a new face, a young paralegal with braces who fumbled with the login tablet and offered a wan smile. I watched her hands tremble slightly as she handed me a waiver form. She called Gregory's assistant, who wasn't in today, and offered to pass along my materials. I asked to wait instead. 40 minutes later, I was seated in Gregory's office across from his enormous antique desk. He looked thinner, more tired. I handed him the stack. "Did you approve these changes?" he asked, flipping through the pages with a practiced flick of the thumb. I didn't even know they existed. Gregory adjusted his glasses. "I'll have to verify the digital signatures, but this revision is valid on paper. And the construction documents—" He hesitated. "These are scans. The originals aren't here. The approval stamp's been retyped." The heat rose slowly in my chest. I was angry, but more than that, I felt erased. On my drive home, the sky was already dimming, a soft violet casting long shadows across the iced-over streets. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A voicemail from Lucian, my old colleague from the planning board. I tapped it on speaker. "Hey, Howie. Was just clearing out some of my old stuff. Found that first sketch of your place. You know, the one from the week after Louise passed. I still have it if you want it. Just say the word." His voice was warm. I hadn't heard it in nearly 2 years. Back home, I climbed into the attic. Dust drifted lazily in the air, glowing in the thin shaft of light from the single window. There, beside a box of cracked ornaments and old scarves, was Beau's cardboard fort. Flattened now, its magic long gone. Nearby, a framed photo of Shale with a yellow sticky note on the glass. "First home loan," he made it. I sat down on the wooden floor, the cold seeping into my knees. Tucked in a side pocket of the frame was a crayon drawing Beau's clearly. It showed our house labeled in blocky letters, Grandpa's house, but over one wing, the part where I lived, was a huge red X. I stared at it for a long time, long enough to feel something shift. My phone buzzed again. A text from Lizette. "Can I stop by with Beau tomorrow? He misses you." Lucien's diner hadn't changed in 20 years. The glass door still jingled the same tired bell. The laminated menus still curled at the edges like autumn leaves resisting the floor. A layer of grease and history coated the pine-paneled walls, and if you pressed your palm against the vinyl seat cushions too long, it left a memory. The only thing different was Rosie, the waitress, who walked like she had known every customer since birth, and called us sweethearts like we were still builders on break. Not ghosts from a union roster. Nobody reads anymore. "You look terrible, Howie," Lucian said as I slid into the booth across from him. "I appreciate the honesty," I muttered, easing into the cracked red vinyl. The seat hissed a sigh beneath my weight. "You didn't used to slouch like that," he said. "What's weighing you down?" I didn't answer right away. I looked around instead. On the far wall beside the dessert specials board hung a photo in a warped metal frame. Me and Lucienne, both younger and stronger and angrier. We were standing in front of the city council building in the late 90s, tool belts slung low, faces red from sun and frustration. I still remembered the protest chants, the raw lumber signs, the ridiculous hope. Rosie came over, poured us tea, and smiled like she didn't notice our brittle bones. "Gray tea apple pie. You're predictable, boys." "We call it consistent," Lucian replied. The tea steamed between us, fogging my glasses. I took them off, wiped them with the napkin Lucian had just flattened with a careful grace. His hands trembled slightly stiff from the cold, or maybe from time. He smoothed each crease like it was sacred geometry. "I lost the garage, Howard," he said, suddenly breaking the silence like a snapped beam. "What?" He sipped his tea, eyes fixed on the peeling laminate. "Let my son take over the paperwork." He said it was time, said I could finally rest. Turns out he meant retire to irrelevance. Changed names on the deed, sold it before I could blink. I gripped the mug tighter. "You fought it too late. I signed papers I didn't read. Trusted blood thicker than oil, I guess." His voice didn't crack, but something in me did. "I'm telling you this not to whine. I'm telling you so you don't let it happen quietly." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive wrapped in a folded napkin. He slid it across the table. "Your sketch, the one from '94. I scanned it years ago before the fire. Thought maybe it was time you saw it again." I picked it up gently like it might splinter. "Why now?" "Because you look like a man who forgot he ever held a hammer for something that mattered." For a while, we didn't speak. We just drank tea that had long gone lukewarm. Rosie brought the pie extra whipped cream on Lucian's because she knew he liked to pretend he didn't want it. "You still think about building?" he asked between bites. "Not houses," I said. "Not since the trust." "Good, then build something they can't take. Something Bo can carry, not inherit." I didn't know what to say to that. So I asked about his arthritis, the diner's rent, if he still whittled pieces of driftwood into dolphins for the church sale. We circled around the real things, like old tradesmen measuring twice and still cutting away. "I remember you planning that living room," he said. "Said you wanted windows so big Bo could chase sunlight through them." That's the man I remember, not the one hiding behind filing cabinets. When I got home that night, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that hums like a warning. I didn't turn on the TV or the lights. Just the desk lamp in my study. The same one with the crooked base and yellow glow like late afternoon in fall. I booted up my laptop, ancient, slow, full of dust and regrets, and slid the flash drive in. The sketch took a minute to load, but when it did, my throat closed. It was all there, the wide porch, the cedar siding, the skylights angled to catch morning sun. Even the oak tree in the back, the one that had died in '99, still shaded the southern wall in pencil strokes. The bottom corner was black and scorched slightly, probably from the fire Lucian had mentioned. But even through the shadowed stain, I saw it the initials HC scribbled in my old drafting pen. I sat back in the chair, let the silence fill me. The house on the screen wasn't perfect. Lines wobbled, proportions strained, but it had breath, it had soul, and it was mine. I stood in the garage at dusk, a flashlight clamped between my teeth, its beam dancing faintly across the clutter like a half-hearted memory. The overhead bulb had burned out 2 winters ago, maybe more, and I never bothered to change it. Standing in the shadows now, I realized that darkness had suited me until it didn't. My breath came out in small white puffs. The cold in the garage wasn't the kind that bit. It pressed slow and constant like the ache of something forgotten but not forgiven. I turned toward the old cabinet in the far corner, the one with the door that never shut right. A faded yellow post-it barely clung to its splintering wood. "Don't trash. Grandpa's stuff." Bo's handwriting. Big letters a little slanted. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe I hadn't wanted to. I opened the cabinet. It exhaled a stale breath of old varnish and paper dust. There were tools I hadn't touched in years, blueprints rolled so tight their edges were brittle, and in the back, a flat parcel wrapped in wax paper aid with a string that had turned gray with age. I knew what it was before I pulled it out. The original sketch. Not a copy, not a scan. The sketch. The one I'd drawn in the spring of 1994, sitting on the porch with a mechanical pencil, the scent of sawdust still in my hair, from the morning's framing. It had been a dream then, a home built with care for a family not yet broken. The paper was yellowed and curled, and one corner bore a scorch mark probably from that heater incident in '09. But the lines were clear, sharp, each doorway, each beam, still where I'd envisioned it. A map of hope now scarred. I set the sketch on my workbench, clearing off an old level, a set of keys I no longer remembered the use for. The wood beneath my hands was cold and gritty. I ran my palm over the paper, flattening it gently. A splinter lodged into the heel of my hand. I paused, pulled it out, wiped the blood on my jeans without thinking. I opened the frame that had once held a photo of Shale's college graduation, popped the backing off, flipped it over, took a chisel from the wall. Then, slow and deliberate, I etched the initials HC94. Not for them, for me. Upstairs, I found the old scanner in a box beneath the coats. It had to be coaxed to life with 2 restarts and a slap on the lid. It whirred and clanked like a diesel engine, then hummed. I scanned the sketch, saved it as transfer document revised.pdf. The irony didn't escape me. I printed 2 copies. One went into a manila folder, labeled in black, permanent marker, transfer of title revision request. The other I clipped to the original document. My handwriting looked foreign now, neat but unsure. Then I opened my laptop, stared at the blinking cursor for a long moment. Finally typed. Subject title revision meeting request. Dear Gregory, confirming 12 p.m. tomorrow for final review and transfer. Regards, Howard Colby. I hit send. The email swooshed off like a pebble into a well. I returned to the garage. The tube from my drafting days sat under the bench, surprisingly intact. I slid the original sketch inside, patted the ends with crumpled tissue, and sealed it with clear tape twice around tight. With a thick black Sharpie, I wrote across the side original, not for return. Then I placed it upright on the workbench like a flag planted in soil I still believed in. Snow had begun to fall, soft and heavy, the kind that blurred sharp things into stillness. Through the garage window, the flakes stuck to the pane and melted in slow rivulets. Inside, everything was quiet. I stood there a while, listening to nothing. And in that nothing, a small resolve began to bloom, not loud, not sudden, but unmistakable. A steady thrum beneath my ribs. Not for revenge, not even for justice. Just to reclaim what had once been mine. My name, my hands, my walls. The lawyer's office smelled like toner and old upholstery, sharp, sterile, and vaguely tired. I sat across from Gregory Chase, who adjusted his glasses every few minutes, even though they didn't seem to slip. Between us, the manila envelope I'd carried for nearly 30 years lay open, its contents carefully spread across the mahogany desk, like the bones of a once-living thing. He flipped through the documents, slowly murmuring dates and notes under his breath. When he reached the original sketch, the one Lucian had returned to me 2 nights ago, he paused, squinted, and let his thumb linger over the corner where the initials HC94 were etched into the fiber. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked without looking up. "I'm sure," I said. My voice didn't waver. That surprised me. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than it should. The fluorescent lighting flickered every so often, casting an irritating rhythm over Gregory's desk. On the wall behind him, a framed HOA fee schedule was proudly displayed. My name, once etched in clear print, had been crossed out in pencil. Above it, someone, probably Shale, had written in black Sharpie, Shale Creed, owner. Gregory shuffled the next set of papers, copies of the original property trust, my construction permits, and the deed Shale had quietly amended in 2020. "Your son's got nerve," he muttered. "Revising this without informing the primary trustee, risky. Possibly illegal depending on the judge." He was counting on silence, I said. He thought I wouldn't notice. The paralegal, a young woman with nervous eyes and bright red nails, typed furiously beside us, her screen blinking as she uploaded scanned copies to the county clerk's secure server. "Emergency declaration," Gregory explained. "We'll challenge the amended deed as invalid and reinstate the original trust. If we file today, they'll have to freeze changes until a hearing." He clicked his pen. "But you need to know this won't stay quiet. Your name, his name. Once it's in the system, it's public. He'll know before sunset." "That's the point," I said. "It's not about hiding anymore." Gregory slid a document toward me, highlighting a line near the bottom. Effective date of trust. Rollback January 1st, 2023. He circled it twice. "If it holds your son's ability to sell, subdivide, or mortgage, this property evaporates on Sunday. He'll be locked out. There was a pause then. Not for drama, just space. I exhaled slowly. My fingers itched to do something, so I adjusted the cuff of my shirt. The fabric had grown thin at the elbows. "Do you want to add a witness statement?" Gregory asked. "No," I said. "The documents speak louder than I can." Outside, the cold air slapped me awake as I stepped onto the granite stoop. I stood there for a long moment, watching as a salt truck rumbled down the road, its bright orange lights spinning in wide arcs across the snow-lined street. I pulled out my phone and called Lizette. She picked up on the second ring. "Howard, tell Beau. I said I want to build something with him next week. Something just ours." There was a silence, then a breath. "He'll love that." I ended the call and looked down at the sealed cardboard tube in my hand, the sketch the one Shale tried to erase. Still warm from the office's dry heat, still marked by my initials, still mine. And finally back where it belonged. I spent New Year's Eve drinking chamomile tea with Beau, building a Lego town that looked suspiciously like Biddeford. He didn't say much at first, just furrowed his brow every time a brick wouldn't click right. His small hands worked with a kind of stubborn focus I recognized too well. The snow outside tapped the old window panes in a rhythm that reminded me of Morse code. In the hush between gusts, I could hear the wind whistle through the attic vent. We sat cross-legged on a crocheted rug Lizette had brought over last year, spreading tiny bricks and beams across the floor, like a planning commission. "Is this the post office?" Beau asked, pointing to a red-roofed square. "Could be," I said. "Or the diner where your mom used to sneak you pie on school nights." Beau grinned, the first real smile I'd seen on his face in days. "Let's say both." We clicked it into place. That was the night's rhythm. Small decisions, gentle hands, quiet building. At some point, I felt the years between us melt into something else. Not quite equals, but not grandfather and boy either. Just two people holding on to something real. In the corner sat the old model of the house, its once pristine balsa wood frame sagging. Beau noticed it while reaching for a missing roof tile. He crawled toward it and blew a thin film of dust off the roof. "Is that the one you made for Dad?" he asked. I nodded. "He was about your age when I built it. It's broken." "Most things are," I said. "But broken doesn't mean useless." He turned it over in his hands. One of the beams had detached. The chimney had fallen in. But when I opened the junk drawer and pulled out a bottle of Elmer's glue, he didn't hesitate. We sat shoulder to shoulder, gluing fallen walls back into place, making repairs without words. The smell of cocoa drifted in from the kitchen. Lizette stepped in silent as a snowfall and placed 2 steaming mugs beside us. One for me, one for Beau. She didn't say anything, just rested her hand lightly on my shoulder for a moment before retreating into the dim hallway. I heard her settle into the recliner, the creak of the cushion oddly comforting. Beau looked up. "What if they say I can't come back?" I didn't look at him. Instead, I placed a white tile onto our Lego city, right where Main Street would be. "Then we'll redraw the map." He considered that. "Can we build a new house in it too? We already are," I said. He leaned over and carefully added a blue window onto the balsa wood model. "I want to live in the house you built. Not the one Dad's selling." It landed like a stone in a pond, small but deep. I glanced at him, saw the tremor in his lip, the way he blinked too fast. "Then we'll keep this one standing," I said quietly. After he fell asleep, curled up on the rug beside the model, his breath steady, I stood and retrieved the clean blueprint copy I'd printed 3 days earlier. The one Gregory had scanned and notarized, dated and filed into the transfer paperwork. I rolled it carefully, wrapped it in thick parchment, and tied it with a piece of jute string from the garage. On the outside, I wrote in my cleanest script, "To Beau. One day." I placed it on the shelf just above his reach, where he might find it again when the time was right. I sat back down, chamomile long gone cold. My eyes wandered toward the window where snow coated the sill like icing. The sky was bruised with the last tones of a weary year. I didn't need to see the fireworks. My laptop dinged on the side table. I leaned over, clicked the screen. A new email, subject HOA dispute notice. Request for mediation. I stared at it, my hand frozen halfway between disbelief and inevitability. Outside, somewhere in the hush of Portland's winter, I imagined the creak of beams mine still holding. They called it informal mediation. Nothing about it felt informal. The fold-out chairs screeched against linoleum. The coffee smelled burned. And Shale's collar was wrinkled like he hadn't realized this meeting might matter. I sat on one end of the rectangular table. A copy of the deed sat in a manila folder before me next to a rolled blueprint bound in a thin leather cord. Shale paced near the whiteboard, tapping a capped marker against his thigh. The HOA chairperson, a woman in her 50s with unreadable eyes, called us to order with a wooden gavel, too ceremonial for this room. "Let's begin," she said, eyes flicking from Shale to me. "We're here to resolve internal title questions raised regarding parcel A127, known locally as Creed Residence." Shale jumped in. "There's no confusion. I've been managing the property since 2020. Legally, financially, my father—" He gestured toward me without looking, chose to step back. I said nothing. The chair nodded to me. "Mr. Creed," I unrolled the blueprint and laid it flat on the table. The paper had yellowed slightly, but the ink still held its shape. In the bottom corner, the signature HC 94. "This is the original architectural plan," I said calmly. "Filed with the city in January 1994. Approved. Permits paid under my name. I built that home with my own hands." The HOA rep leaned forward. "You kept the original." Even after being pushed out, I nodded. Lucian cleared his throat from the back of the room. He wore a pressed shirt and jeans sitting straighter than I'd seen in years. "I have a letter," he said, "from Dean Marshall, retired HOA zoning architect. He confirms that this house's original grant shape and approval was overseen by Howard Creed. No revisions were processed until 2020. The chair read the letter in silence. Then she turned to the paralegal seated behind her. "Do we have confirmation of the emergency override filing dated December 28th? The young man nodded. "Yes. Recorded and time-stamped. Effective rollback January 1st. Shale's hands clenched. "You knew what this would do to me." Why, now I met his eyes for the first time. "Because it's not about you." For a moment, no one moved. The chair placed the gavel gently down. Given the documentation and with verification from former oversight personnel, the HOA recognizes the reversion to Mr. Howard Creed as principal of trust. All modifications filed under Mr. Shale Creed since 2020 are void. Future changes require renewed submission under the original architect's oversight. Shale stood mouth twitching like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find an angle. He didn't say goodbye, just swept his coat from the back of the chair and left the door swinging too hard behind him. Lizette stayed seated. She didn't clap or smile. She just nodded, then came to stand beside me. Her voice was low but sure. "You didn't raise your voice once, but you raised your legacy." Lucienne winked from the corner and said nothing. Sometimes the best carpenters just measure once and cut true. I rolled the blueprint again, careful this time, and placed it back in its tube. We walked out under a sky dulled by winter, the kind of gray that hides time. Beau was waiting in the car, nose pressed to the back window, eyes wide. As I opened the door, he asked, "Can we build that treehouse now?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, bud, let's start drawing the plans tonight." Beau's laughter rang sharp and bright against the brittle air as he darted across the backyard. My old tool belt cinched around his waist, like a knight's scabbard bouncing with every step. The hammer he held was a little too large for his grip, but he wielded it with the kind of confidence only children have, the certainty that whatever they build will hold. The yard still bore patches of snow, mostly along the fence line and under the dormant maple, but where we stood near the frame of what would become the base of the new treehouse, or perhaps just a bench. For now, the ground was thawing, wet, fragrant, full of promise. Inside on my desk near the window lay a card with gold embossing. I hadn't told Beau or Lizette about it yet. The HOA's seal in the corner was almost comical considering everything, but the message inside was straightforward. "Would you consider consulting on the redesign of the community park pavilion? Your original structural plans still stand as some of the most stable in district record. We'd be honored." Beau called to me, "Can we do the backrest now?" I knelt beside him, picking up the cedar slats I'd cut that morning. "Let's mark the drill points first," I said, handing him the carpenter's pencil. His fingers were sticky with dried glue and cocoa from earlier, but he gripped the pencil carefully and drew crooked X's across the slats. I didn't correct him. From the kitchen window, Lizette appeared watching, but not interrupting. She had become quieter over the last week, less defensive, less caught between. In her hand, she held the framed blueprint copy. Clean lines, restored edges, initials, re-signed HC 94. "I thought this might look nice in Beau's room," she said, when she finally stepped out. "It deserves to be where he sleeps. Not boxed away like an old mistake." I nodded, not trusting my voice for a moment. The frame caught the late sunlight glass gleaming. I watched as she knelt to Beau's level, showed it to him, and he traced the lines with his thumb. "This is the room you sleep in now," she whispered. "But this whole thing, he built it, before anyone else even believed it would stand." I turned away and began hammering. Later that afternoon, after we'd mounted the backrest, and Beau had run inside to show Lucien a splinter in his finger, like it was a war wound, I stayed outside. The sky had started turning the color of rusted pewter, the sun a smudge behind thin clouds. From the sidewalk, I noticed a familiar shape. Shale stood across the street, arms crossed, coat unzipped against the cold. He didn't wave, neither did I. He watched for a few seconds more, then turned and walked down the block, not once looking back. I didn't call out. Inside, Lizette had placed the framed sketch above Beau's bed. The boy had already started rearranging his Lego towns to match the house's angles. Not perfectly, of course, but close enough that I could see what he saw. Not the structure, but the spirit. On the dining table where the cocoa mug still rested, a letter lay open beside the napkin holder. The HOA had formally approved the redesign plan. I was listed as the project's lead advisor. No title, no pay, just trust. Before bed, I slipped an old photograph into an envelope. The edges were worn, but the image remained. Lucien and me standing beside the first beam of the original house frame, tool belts sagging, grinning like fools who didn't yet understand permanence was an illusion. I addressed it to Beau's elementary school legacy week. Show and tell submission, what I want to be when I grow up. I placed it on the sideboard next to the toolbox, Beau now claimed as his own. Then I walked to my desk, flipped open the planner I hadn't touched in years, and wrote with slow, deliberate ink, February, begin redesign, Park Pavilion. The snow had mostly melted by the time we finished the bench, but the wood still held the warmth of our hands. From Beau's window, I could just make out the sketch we'd framed together, once burned at the edge, now matted clean and hung straight. Turns out legacy isn't something you leave behind. It's something you build again quietly, even after it's been taken. Sometimes you don't need to raise your voice, you just need to stay standing. If you've ever been written out of a chapter you started, maybe it's time to pick up the pen again. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? Feel free to share your story in the comments or just say hi if you've ever fixed something with Elmer's glue and hope.